Good day. Welcome to the Great White North, where things are cold and they are wet, which is why I'm in my yard making use of the few and short breaks in precipitation. Tilt-shift lenses are most often associated with landscape or architectural photography, though they are beneficial when capturing macro imagery. So today I'm going to be telling you all about Laowa's new 55mm f2.8 tilt-shift macro lens and its 100mm sibling, showing you what a tilt-shift macro lens is capable of, and then giving you a few of my thoughts and comments about this specific lens, though not all in this order. And I think the color of my toque changes at some point. Photographing a subject that is static, where the majority of said subject is in focus, can be achieved relatively easily with focus stacking. Many layers of thin depth of fields all stack on top of each other. However, if you're trying to document a subject that is moving, say a specific behavior from a subject, focus stacking isn't an option. This is also obviously true, hopefully, if you're capturing video. So a tilt-shift macro lens can help greatly if you're trying to document a subject that is moving. And when I say greatly, it depends on what magnification you're using. A tilt-shift macro lens is not a magic wand. It doesn't in any way increase the size of your depth of field or the depth of the depth of field. It simply allows you to better align your depth of field or focal plane with your subject. And the degree to which you can do that depends on the magnification you're using. So in this first example, I'm using a very, very small magnification. I'm focusing past infinity, and the taillights, the side of the vehicle, the headlights, and the trees in the background all appear to be in focus. And the depth of field and focal plane looks as if it's running straight through the composition perpendicular to my sensor. However, using a higher magnification, we'll be looking at the skull of a small animal, probably a rat. It's in my backyard, and I'm shooting it 1:1, so the highest magnification possible on this 55mm lens, and I'm going to be looking at the teeth. So when the depth of field is parallel to my sensor, there's no shift applied to this lens, one of those teeth is in focus, very nice and sharp. However, if I tilt to the maximum 10 degrees that this lens allows, you will see two teeth are in focus. It is not a dramatic difference. This is not going to replace focus stacking at all. It's also important to understand it may look like I'm doing my business in the woods, but really I'm just talking to you. Addressing the elephant in the room, and it is a big elephant, it's the size and weight of this lens. This is a 55mm lens, and it's a big one. The reason why is the optical design. When you look at it, this has 14 optical elements in 11 groups. Its 100mm sibling has 13 elements in 10 groups, and the optical differences don't equate to a big physical difference in the size and weight. So this 55mm version weighs 1,450 grams and stretches about 17 centimeters in length. The 100mm sibling is 1,310 grams and has a 16 centimeter length. So very, very negligible differences. Now, if you look at something you're hopefully a little more familiar with, this is a Canon EF 70-200 f2.8 LIS. It's a version 2. So this lens is 20 centimeters in length and it weighs 1,490 grams. So a very similar lens, and it hopefully gives you some context just how big this 55mm lens is. The reason behind it is actually quite obvious when you look at the image circle. So both of these lenses are designed for a full frame camera, 35mm sensor. The image circle on this 70-200 is a 35mm image circle. However, on this tilt shift lens, it's a 67mm image circle, essentially a full or a medium format image circle. Tilting or shifting A 35 millimeter image circle on a full frame sensor would result in some very serious vignetting. And in fact, it wouldn't even be vignetting, it would just be the visible edges of the image circle, which is exactly what you see in these examples. These photos were captured with a Laowa 15 millimeter f4 macro lens that does have shift capabilities, and you can see the image circle, the edges of it. However, the converging lines in the trees are resolved very beautifully. So with this lens and its 67 millimeter image circle, in addition to being compatible with the Canon RF, Nikon Z, Sony E, Leica L, it's also compatible with the Fujifilm GFX and the Hasselblad XCD lens mounts, which are medium format. The image quality of this lens is like that of all the other Laowa lenses that I've had the opportunity to use. That is to say, it is phenomenal. It is sharp at f2.8, corner to corner, all the way to f11, where diffraction takes hold and things start to fall off a little bit. Bokeh is very pleasing. This has 15 aperture blades, so those bokeh balls are very circular. The contrast is very unique. It is punchy, but without being overpowering. It holds a lot of character. It is very pleasing. Barrel distortion at 55 millimeters is negligible. You're not even going to see it at f2.8. So overall, the optics of this lens, they're great. The build quality of this lens is terrific. It is like that, again, of all other Laowa lenses I have used. It is very tough, it's robust, it's not weather sealed. Being a tilt shift lens, there are a lot of moving parts, and weather sealing that I don't imagine is something easy to engineer, so no complaints there. Hopefully the rain holds off a bit longer. The focus ring is very smooth. I compare it to that of Laowa's 90 millimeter macro lens. If you've not used or heard about that lens, check out my review. I think actually in that video I call the focus ring addictive, just how smooth it is, and this is kind of the same. I believe we're going to do a little non-scientific test here. I believe it's about 180 degrees of focus pull, where my index finger is. So maybe not 180, maybe about 160 degrees of focus pull. Definitely enough to make finite adjustments when using high magnification, or at least 1:1. Now the aperture ring is semi-declicked, not that I imagine you actually adjusting your iris or aperture while capturing video while using this lens. The tension knobs are very easy to release and they're very easy to apply tension, and they will hold that tension quite well. You're not going to find this lens flopping around in a case or a bag after transport. Where this lens falls very short is the tripod foot. It is attached to the lens with only 2 small screws, and they come loose very easily, and in addition to that, there's just a lot of play. I will expand on that tripod foot. I hate to do this, but it is worth mentioning this lens's Achilles heel one more time, or its tripod foot. So the tripod foot does have an Arca-Swiss plate built into it, and that is fantastic. When most lenses just have a flat foot and you have to add your own plate, added bonus. But the amount of play or wiggle in this tripod foot is incredibly frustrating. If you're trying to compose a shot, you have this locked down on a tripod, and your head is loose and you're manipulating the composition by moving your camera, you find your composition, tighten everything down, you let go of your camera, and it just sags so much that the composition changes dramatically. It is frustrating. I would like to see something stronger than this from lenses that will be used for macro applications. I hope that is obvious. It's certainly not as beneficial as the tilt functionality is to the capture of macro imagery, but this lens also includes 12 millimeters, or just over 1 centimeter, of shift functionality. And a 55mm focal length may not be the best focal length to demonstrate shift functionality, but I'm going to give it a shot. If you're looking at this stand of trees, it is a forest, they are tree trunks, but if you follow the tree trunks, the paths or their trajectories past the top of the frame, imagining them going much higher, they would eventually converge, hence the term converging lines. So if you apply the appropriate amount of shift, in this case it is the full 12mm, you will see the trees are standing much more upright. And again, if you follow their imaginary path past the top of the frame, they're no longer converging. It's much more impactful and much stronger. And this is much more obvious with architectural photography, but forests are more engaging in my opinion. What is also a little bit noticeable is some pretty significant vignetting. If you look at the upper third of the shifted photo, it is almost one stop underexposed. This can obviously be corrected with some post-processing, but it's something to consider when you're composing your shots and you're applying a significant amount of shift. It's the tilt functionality of a tilt shift macro lens that has the biggest impact on macro imagery. And this lens, the 55mm and its 100mm sibling, can tilt 10 degrees in essentially any direction. So 10 degrees to the left, 10 degrees to the right, and you can rotate this axis pretty easily. There's a little button here. So now you can tilt 10 degrees down and 10 degrees up. You are also able to rotate the axis on very small increments, so you could have a diagonal depth of field running through your composition. It doesn't always have to be 90 degrees or 180 degrees. You can get pretty creative. Now, if you're like me and you don't have the opportunity to use a tilt shift lens too frequently, the first thing you do when you pick this lens up is crank it to 10 degrees and have some fun. And it really is fun to do this. However, when capturing macro photography, I would suggest actually starting your composition with the depth of field parallel to your sensor plane and then slowly tilting to find where the depth of field best aligns with your subject. If you move all the way to 10 degrees and try and line it up with your subject, you might not actually be making the best use of your depth of field. So using this fern frond as an example, starting with 0 degrees of tilt, the depth of field is parallel to the sensor, a little bit, just the end of that frond is in focus, but if I crank it all the way to 10 degrees, a little more is in focus. However, if I pull back a little bit, let's say to 5 degrees of tilt, there's a heck of a lot more of that fern frond in focus. So it shows how the maximum, the 10 degrees of tilt, may actually not be the best option for all subjects. It's important just to go slowly and find where that depth of field best aligns with whatever you're photographing. Hopefully you now have a greater understanding of what a tilt shift macro lens is capable of, and more specifically what the Laowa 55mm and its 100mm sibling are all about. There are other manufacturers who offer tilt shift macro lenses, and of those that I've had the chance to use, this is the winner. Image quality, so sharpness, contrast, as well as build quality are all far superior. That said, it does come with a steeper price tag, but you do get what you pay for. I had the opportunity to use this lens for 3 whole months, and massive thank you to Laowa for letting me hang on to it for so long. That said, I took it everywhere. I took this lens by itself to family outings, places that I would typically take a 50 prime or a 35 prime. You saw it on the B-roll. I took this to the zoo, I took it to the aquarium, and I took it there with kids. Anyone who has rugrats running around knows how challenging it is to capture imagery and enjoy the process. There is no time to compose. It is snapshot, snapshot. This lens allowed me to reignite a spark in a hobby that has been dampened by becoming a profession. The ability to capture macro imagery as well as engaging compositions through the use of tilt shift, it is a fantastic and fun lens. With that, the big question is that worth carrying around the equivalent of a 70 to 200mm lens? That is a question for you to answer. Personally, I think heck yes. Thank you for watching. If you have a question or a comment, put it down below. Thanks again, and I will see you next time. is a bug on my forehead.